le due luci del mare, stava la mano che si lagava, le caligna che dice su buon mune, stava la mano che si lagava, e me per tu vestito le medei, stava la mano che si lagava, già spurito che non mi sai.
Hey, welcome again, everyone. So we're here for the second day of LiveMEEG. Let me say a few words before we start, both collaborative tools and data collection today. So we're here with collaborative tools and here with data collection. So we really enjoyed yesterday's sessions. Thank again to all the speakers, the chair, and the participants in the chat. We had 695 unique attendees over the whole day. We had an overall great feedback. Thank you again for the kind messages. We are very happy to see many of you interacting and helping each other in the Gazettown platform. We have now 57 posters on stands. Make sure you go check them out tonight. In addition, as a special event tonight, we will have a live DJ the EO, in the bar, so feel free to hop on the dance floor and use the Z button. Let's try that one. Thank you again to our academic partners, ILCB, LPL, Imaging Center at ICM, and INS. So I'm going to now let Manuel take over the collaborative tool session with you guys. And I'm going to stay with you.
Hello, people. This is Code 2. We are going to move to the other room to start this session that will be chaired by Karim Jerbi. Here we go. Hello, Karim. How are you?
Hey, salut Manuel. Good morning, everyone. So we kick this off. Do you have any comments to make, Manuel, before we get started?
No, it's all yours. We will start our first talk in a minute. I'm going to pilot this session. Thank you very much, Karim, for accepting to help us. And see you in a little bit.
Great. Okay, so it is my pleasure to chair this session on collaborative tools. I would first of all like to start by saying what a wonderful job the organizers have been doing so far in this meeting. The day yesterday was great, and we're all looking forward to great times ahead for today and tomorrow and the rest of the meeting. It is roughly 8:07 here in Montreal, so I just about had my first coffee. I know it's 2 p.m. In Marseille and Paris. It's 3 p.m. in Helsinki and Moscow. It's 9 a.m. in Santiago de Chile. It's 9 p.m. in Seoul and Tokyo, 1 p.m. in Tunis and in London, 5 a.m. in Los Angeles, Tijuana and San Diego, and it's 5:30 in Mumbai and Delhi. So I don't know who we have from which countries, but feel free to just tip down in the chat the country you're currently in. That would be fun for the rest of us to know where you're all following this from. So we have an exciting session today. We're going to start with Guiomar Nisso, who's going to tell us all about bits. Then we'll have a lecture by Martina Villas, who's going to tell us all about the Turing Way, a new handbook. Then we'll have a short break. And after the break, we will have a presentation by Antonio Schettino, who's going to tell us all about OSF, so the Open Science Framework. And then we will have our roundtable discussions where we'll be taking questions, so feel free to ask your questions. The questions that receive the most votes by others will be voted up high, so we'll start probably with those questions, but definitely feel free to ask your questions during the talks. And that will take us till roughly 9:45 Montreal time, and that's where we'll have the break and end the session. We're looking forward to this. Our first speaker is going to be even though I see Martina right now, but I think our first speaker is going to be Guiomar Nisso, who's supposed to open the session. Here comes Guiomar, as you can see. And just before, you saw Martina on the screen. And our third speaker is Antonio Schettino, who we've also seen yesterday. So we're very happy to have this amazing people on this session, and I'm going to hand over the microphone to Guiomar Nisso to begin the first talk, and you'll hear all about BIDS and BIDS derivative. So Guiomar, it's all yours.
Hi, I'm going to share this screen. Can you see it? Hi. Thank you very much, Karim, for your very kind introduction, and all the organizer for this fantastic event. Today I'm going to talk a bit about BIDS, which is a standard that I hope it helps to support these good practices that we were talking yesterday. So BIDS stands for the Brain Imaging Data Structure, which is a standard to store, organize, and share your neuroimaging data. Why is it needed? This is Professor Smith. I need to ask Mike about this old data. There's so much more we can do with it. But meet Mike. I no longer work in the lab. So Professor Smith needs a lot of help. What's the problem? The problem is data is organized differently between institutions and even within a lab. So this produces suboptimal use of resources. Human resources, because we spend lots of time retrieving and rearranging data. Suboptimal usage of infrastructure, because we need a lot of data storage space. And of course, financial, because disorganized data has very limited value after the first publication. All this conduces to poor reproducibility of results, even within the lab where the data were collected. So the solution is to use a standard like BIDS to try to organize and share your data. What is BIDS? BIDS is based on simple file formats and folder structure. It's worth mentioning that BIDS is not a file format, but it recommends which file formats to use. For example, Nifty, JSON, CSV. It also recommends the naming conventions for files and directories. And finally, it prevents metadata getting lost while doing your research. So it's stored in JSON files, which are readable by both humans and machines. So even if we have some metadata and we don't have all the metadata of the study, this is better than having anything, than having nothing. So data structure and metadata organized by BIDS. So this is like very like an example of what BIDS is used for. BIDS organizes, it describes, and it keeps all the metadata of your study. So what are the principles behind BIDS? The first one is adoption. We want to minimize complexity and facilitate adoption. We don't want to reinvent the wheel, so we want to reuse existing methods and technologies whenever possible. Another key to success is the 80-20 rule, where we try to tackle first the 80% of the most commonly used cases. And finally, the engagement of the global neuroimaging community, which is the most important part because we receive input for the whole community during the creation of the specifications. So why is it needed? Are you acquiring human neuroimaging data? Are you a PI and want to ensure your students and postdocs document their data so other members of your lab can reuse it later? Or are you a researcher planning to share your data with others? Or do you want to avoid having to call the scanner manager to figure out what was done a long time ago? This is how you feel when you're working with data acquired by someone else? Ooh. Or even worse, is it how you feel when working with data acquired by you a long time ago? If this is the case, then you should definitely use bits. The benefits of using bits is for researchers, it's easy for other researchers to work on your data, and for PIs, if you anticipate more than one person is going to be working on the same data over time, it's worth going with bits. Also, a growing number of software packages can read data in bits. For here in MEG and EEG community, we have Brainstorm, Filtrip, MNEPython, SPM, and many other software tools that help you going to analyze with your data. But databases, if you ever plan to share your data publicly, and nowadays, as we heard yesterday, some journals require this, then you can minimize the additional time and energy spent on publication and speed up the querying processes. For example, there are databases like OpenNeuro that accepts datasets in bits. And we have validation tools where we can check dataset integrity and help you easily spot missing values. So this could be an example dataset as it comes out of the scanner, and this is a dataset organized following the bits. This one doesn't spark joy, and this one sparks. This is taken from a tweet from Remy. Yeah. So who is the bits for? Bits can be useful, as we said, for lab PIs and researchers because it enables easy transference of a dataset from the one student or postdoc to another. For workflow developers, because it's easy to write pipelines expecting a particular file organization. And for database curators, because it facilitates curation accepting one dataset format. So bits, it's mainly the standard, the specification, and the extensions, but also we have bits tools and the bits collaboration pillar, which is around the bits community, which is also very important. So regarding the bits specification, you can find it here online with all kind of details. We are going to review an example. Here we have example 1, and we have some files related to this dataset and the subjects with their data. If we start with the dataset description JSON file, it's just a dataset. It's just a document that describes all the keywords related to the dataset. For example, the name, its version, like acknowledgements, the authors, how to acknowledge, funding, all these kind of details. We'll also have the participant JSONs and participant TSV files. The TSV is just a tabular separated value with some columns and some info, like participant ID, age, and sex. And the JSON is just to describe these columns and the variables, like age and sex. What does this refer to? If we go to a modality dataset, like anatomical MRI, you will have also some JSON accompanying with the metadata accompanying the NI files. For example, here you will have like modality, you have to put that SMR, then you will have the manufacturer, Siemens, the patient position, the service description, scanning sequences, all this kind of metadata is stored there, together with the raw data coming from the scanner. If we in our session we have MEG or EEG, we will have also this kind of JSON files accompanying the MEG data. So for the MEG JSON files, it stores like the institution names, manufacturer, in this case, for example, it could be CTF or Electa, the sampling frequency, the power line frequency, the scanner position, the device position. The same for EEG JSON files. We have all the same, some very common files like institution names, manufacturers, in this case would be brain products, but also some specific to EEG, like EEG reference, like left mastoid or EEG placement scheme. So all this allows you to have your metadata well stored and organized. If you want to see more details, you of course can go to the specification that I just mentioned, and there you can see how there are some fields that are required, some that are recommended, and some that are optional. So as we said, we have the specification for bits, which is the one that first was established in 2016. And we also have the extension for MEG that came later and started the path for other electrophysiological extensions like EEG and intracranial EEG. So with all these specifications, we can have a really broad set of modalities, of neuroimaging modalities. In addition, very recently, we just released the common derivatives, which is an enormous effort to try to organize the outputs of the processing and preprocessing pipelines. So a derivative is just that, like the output of a processing pipeline. It should capture sufficient data and metadata to understand it, what's inside, and to be able to reuse it in subsequent processing steps. For the moment, we have preprocessed data because this is the first effort we did, and we refer to preprocessed data like as data which is fundamentally similar to source data. That, for example, data type remain unchanged. For example, artifact removal, motion correction, and resample of a template space. We also have processed data, which is fundamentally different to the source data. Data type may be changed. So, for example, here, mask and segmentations. This is very general because it was the first effort and it should be modality specific agnostic. But we are trying to, and we are doing some efforts now to try to develop the electrophysiological derivatives, which will deal with the derivatives coming from MEG and EEG. This is under development at BEP 21, at extension 21, and we are having a poster 55, which you can come and visit now later in Gathertown, and this will be presented by Chris Markovits, and who has laid the effort on the common derivatives. And as we said, we have many extension proposals. Well, here I gather some of them. So we have many modalities, many derivatives tools, and we have, for example, the arterial spin labeling and the position emission tomography PET that are going to be very soon merged into the main specification, so they will become official. So if you ever think of an extension, you think it makes sense, don't feel shy and come and propose it, and we can work on it, and the community will respond surely very, very positively. These are the webs that have already been merged, as we said, like common derivatives, EEG, hierarchical event description tags, MEG, intracranial EEG, genetic information. Yeah, there are a lot. And in addition to all these extensions, we have built multiple tools and converters to make it easy for researchers to incorporate bits into their current workflows and to maximize data sharing opportunities, for example, via OpenNeuro. These are some of the tools: converters, institution-specific tools, quality assessment. And we have also bits apps. What's a bits app? A bits app is a container with a neuroimaging pipeline that takes a bits dataset as an input. So it doesn't depend on any software outside of the image other than the container. So it's quite useful to run them on multi-platform. There are two technologies for a container computer: Docker, which is mainly for local hardware, for running containers on local hardware and on the cloud, and Singularity, which is mainly for HPCs. Bits apps are deposited on the Docker Hub repository, so they are openly accessible. Each bit app is versioned, and all the historical versions are available to download. And reporting the bits app's name and version in a manuscript provides author with the ability to exactly reproduce and replicate the analysis workflow. So all these tools, all these apps are really useful. And as well as this, we have the validator that enables you to check your dataset integrity and spot any missing values. You can do it online or on local. And finally, the BITS collaboration pillar, which is mainly centered on the BITS community. Because BITS, it's a community-led standard, the result of an ongoing collaboration of people like many of you. And the specification is shared knowledge, discussions, and consensus through the email discussion list, through the shared Google Docs, through GitHub. This is our GitHub page. And we have a well-specified governance structure. BITS extensions proposals, as we have seen, are called BAPs, and each of one has a leader. And they communicate with the BITS steering group. This year BITS steering group, as you can see, where people from around the world with expertise in different modalities. So every modality can be represented. And we also have an amazing team of maintainers, like with Stefan, Chris, and Funky. And recently Taylor Salo that has joined the team. And BITS, it's a very open and inclusive community. You're really welcome to join and contribute. And we have the BITS Starter Kit, where you can go and click and see how can you start contributing. Contributions can be made at all the levels, from the introductory to intermediate to expert. And over the last year, there have been many updates, like we merged several webs, the genetic and the common derivatives, and we created new webs like execution, provenance, motion data, near histology. And yeah, BITS is changing the way in which neuroimaging research is done. We have contributions and collaborations all around the world. Maybe we need to put some more emphasis in the global south, but still it's quite revolutioning what we have created all together, and the citations of the papers are growing every year. And yeah, I think organizing your data in BITS, it's really useful. A global community of over 200 people created BITS standards and tools for many neuroimaging modalities, MRI, MEG, EEG, intracranial, and many more that are to come, ready to be merged soon in the next specifications updates, and also derivatives. So organizing your data in BITS is really good for future users. And even better, it's very good for future use. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for listening, and to all the big community we have.
Thank you very much. Yomar, this was a great introduction to BIDS and BIDS derivative. There's definitely a very fascinating and extremely exciting time where we're moving towards this common structure for all different types of neuroimaging data. Clearly, this is, we hope to see this being adopted by a maximum number of laboratories, because this is going to be extremely useful. And I think there's a lot of work that has been done and that is not visible. People see the output and see the papers, but there's a lot of work that the community has been doing. So I think this is also worth mentioning, that all the work that you guys have been putting into this to actually make this happen, because as we say, the devil is in the details. And getting these things to work and getting a structure and getting an agreement and consensus on what is mandatory, what is recommended, and what is optional, and how to deal with these things it's really complicated. And so you're doing all the hard work that's going to help a lot of people, I think, benefit from it, and different labs across the globe. So I'm just going to check with Manuel. I think we're going to have the questions all together at the end, or shall I maybe pick up a few questions now for Guiomar? Manuel? Just want to make sure I don't mess up the plan. So I think it says yes, let's move on. So okay, so Guiomar will come back with the questions in the roundtable discussion, all of us together at the end of this session. Thanks once again for this really very clear and very exciting talk. So now we're going to move on to the presentation by Martina Villas, who is going to tell us all about the Turing Way and a handbook that has been developed by the community with a lot of contributions from what I understand. So we're looking forward to that. So Martina, it's all yours. Go ahead. You can share your slides with us.
Hi, everyone. Can you see my slides? Yeah. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Martina, and today I'm going to talk about the Turing Way. Thanks to the organizers for the opportunity and for putting together such an amazing online conference, which is a really hard thing to do. So before starting, a little bit about me. I'm a PhD student in neuroscience at the Max Planck Institute in Frankfurt, Germany. And currently, under the supervision of Lucia Meloni, I'm trying to understand how the brain processes abstract information using MEG data. But in February, I became involved with the Turing Way. I attended a book dash. I'll explain what a book dash is later. And since then, I provide infrastructure support to the project, and I'm a core contributor and maintainer. So to the important part, what is the Turing Way? Well, if you've heard about it, you probably heard about its online book on reproducible science. But the Turing Way is much more than a book on reproducible science. It's also an open source project, a culture of collaboration, and a community. And I'll explain what each of these features means throughout the talk. Before starting, a big shout out to Scriberia, who is the person who did these drawings, and you can access all of them and reuse them for whatever purpose you may like if you go to the Zenodo page of the Turing Way. So as I said before, if you have heard about the Turing Way, you probably heard about its online book in reproducible science. And the person in this illustration is Kirsty Whittaker, who is the project leader of the Turing Way, but she's also the program lead for tools, practices, and systems at the Alan Turing Institute in UK. So Kirsty and others had this amazing idea of creating an online book whose mission goal was to make reproducible research too easy not to do. And this is how the book looked in its very beginnings. But if we're talking about reproducible research, I guess that is better if we define what we mean by that. Reproducible research is when we take the same data and the same analysis, and we get the same answers over and over again if we repeat it. It's different from replicable research, where you have different data but similar, and you carry out the same analysis to get similar results. Or robust research, where you have the same data but different but similar analysis, and you get similar results. And generalizable research, where you get different data and analysis but similar, and you get similar results. And I guess we can all agree that all of these four concepts are important for the advancement of science, but reproducible research is like the lowest standard we should aim to cover. If we cannot ensure that our work is reproducible, then we can hardly ensure that it's replicable, robust, or generalizable. And there are many benefits as to why one should want to conduct reproducible research, and those benefits are not only necessary or good for the advancement of science, but also are beneficial in a selfish way. So if you want to conduct reproducible research, you definitely need to track the data you've used, the methods, the tools, the software that you've used, and you need to share those as well. So as you can imagine, if you have everything written down, all the steps written down, then it's much more efficient to write your paper it also makes it easier for others to understand what you have done and in which ways you have done the research that you've done, and then also facilitates peer review, of course. And if you have a clear documentation as to who did what, then of course the process of assigning credits for your work is easier. And of course, you are less prone to make errors, or at least catch those errors before they get to the publication stage. So you avoid paper retractions and you avoid misinformation of the general public. And you ensure continuity in the sense that others have more trust in your work and thus can carry your work forward in different directions. But if the benefits are so clear, then why are we all not carrying out reproducible research by default, where it turns out there are many barriers to it, and there are so many, unfortunately, that I cannot explain them all. But I would say that the Turing Way was born to tackle these three. So reproducible research is not considered for promotion, meaning that grant reviewers or journals don't usually take into account if your work is reproducible when they are evaluating your work. It also requires additional skills and skills that are usually not taught to researchers. So you need to know about data management, about software development, about version control, about continuous integration, and so on. And of course, learning all this takes time, and applying the reproducibility principles to your work, at least the first time you're doing it, it takes time. But this part is, I guess, misleading, because it might take time the first time you're doing it, but once you have to go back to your work at whatever stage during peer review, or if you want to continue your work into some other direction, if you ensure that your work is reproducible, every time you have to come back to it, it's probably going to take less time. So this is how the guide for reproducible research of the Turing Way looks like now. As you see, there are many chapters, but then the next question is of how do these chapters cover or ensure reproducibility in the whole research cycle? So as you can see, you have chapters that talk about how to ensure reproducibility when you're collecting data, how to better preserve your data in a way that others can later reuse it. There are a lot of chapters that talk about reproducibility in terms of your code, or making sure that you have a computational environment that is reproducible. And there's a chapter also on continuous integration techniques. There is a chapter that explains how to, once you've collected your data and your software, how to make sure, how to open that up to the public in a way that ensures privacy, but also ensures that you're fairly accredited for your work. But of course, reproducibility is not something that you have to think about from data collection on, but you should think about it from the very beginning when you're planning and designing your project. So there is a chapter on licensing that is how to license your data, how to license your code. And then there's a very nice chapter called case studies that gives nice examples of fully reproducible work that you can take as inspiration before you start your journey. And there are other chapters that cover the whole research cycle. So one of my favorites is version control. It teaches you how to use Git to track the history of your research project. There's another one called Research Compendia that what it does is shows you how to package all the steps that you have taken on your research project and give others this package so that they can fully reproduce each step that you are taking with your project. And all these chapters can be further enhanced, or maybe you're thinking, oh, there is a chapter missing regarding this topic, or you think that maybe your work is a very nice example of reproducible research and it might be a nice case study for the Turing Way. So you're very welcome to contribute any kind of idea in this regard to the Turing Way. And currently, the Turing Way is not only a guide for reproducible research, it's also a guide for project design, meaning that how to design your project from the very beginning to be inclusive and reproducible. It's also a guide for effectively communicating your research and effectively collaborating with others, and a guide for ensuring that your work is also ethical. But as I said before, the Turing Way is not only a book, it's also an open source project. And what this means is that everybody can freely read, reuse, distribute, modify, and help develop the Turing Way. So there's this another page that contains all the talks that have been given about the Turing Way, all the drawings. Everything is under a CC BY license, so you can reuse it for whatever purposes you may have, as long as you give proper attribution, of course. And the content of the book and other things like workshops given by the Turing Way are all hosted on GitHub. So if you want to contribute to them, you open an issue or a pull request to this GitHub repo. But it's also an open source project because the Turing Way is also built on top of another open source tools. So as I said, the Turing Way is an online book, and its infrastructure is given by another open source tool called JupyterBook. If you haven't heard about it, check it out because it's amazing. I have the link down below there. And as I said before, I provide infrastructure support to the project, and this is what I mean. I make sure that the JupyterBook of the Turing Way is working correctly. And if you're interested in the JupyterBook, this week there's the JupyterCon conference, and we're giving a tutorial with Malvika Sharan, who is the community manager of the Turing Way, and Sarah Gibson, who is a research software engineer of the Alan Turing Institute, on how to create a JupyterBook using the Turing Way as an example. You don't need to be registered for the conference. All the material is accessible to everyone using the link below. But the Turing Way is also a culture of collaboration. And this means that it's made to be inclusive, open, welcoming to everyone. It's meant to be a safe environment for everyone to join. But I would say that one of its strongest features is that it's especially welcoming for people who have never contributed to an open source project before. So if you're not familiar with Git or GitHub, then the Turing Way is like the best place that you can start contributing to an open source. Not only because you have a lot of documentation on how to open your first issue or submit your first pull request, but also because you have a lot of people there, friendly people who are very keen to mentor you, guide you in the process of making your first contribution. And not only you can submit content to the Turing Way or provide infrastructure support like I do, there are other things that you can do for the Turing Way. And for example, you can review other people's pull requests. You can help translate some of its contents. Maybe you detected an error when you were reading the book. You can also help fix that. And the important part is that everybody gets acknowledgement for their work, no matter what it is. So the Turing Way uses an all contributors vote. And this means that if you create a pull request to the project and this pull request gets accepted, then this vote automatically adds you to this table of contributors and adds an emoji describing what you have added to the project. So for example, this person fixed a bug. And there's also another addition to the project where you can also highlight your work further in a file, a common markdown file in the repository, but it's also something that you can see in the book where you say who you are and how you have contributed to the project. And for example, in this case, what you're doing is highlighting more thoroughly your work. If you haven't only fixed a bug one point in time, but you do so every week, then this will get more highlighted in this document. And finally, I want to highlight that the Turing Way is a community, and more especially is an open community. So this means that anyone can join and contribute to, doesn't matter in which part of the world you are, doesn't matter which background you have, you can contribute to the project. And it also means that the directions and the goals are determined collaboratively. And there are a lot of community events that the Turing Way has. So there are what it's called collaboration cafes and co-working calls. These are done weekly in the case of co-working calls, or every 2 weeks in the case of collaboration cafes. But the idea is we get together, we try to fix something in the Turing Way or add some content to it, or maybe discuss open science in general or other open source projects. And then there is also these book dash events, as I mentioned before. They used to be in person. This was back in February in London, not anymore, of course. But the idea is that we get together and we try to contribute create content for the book or enhance some aspect of the book in a sprint-like manner. And there's one coming up in November, and you can apply for it until the 22nd of October, I think. And all these events are currently organized by Malvika Sharan, who is the amazing community manager of the Turing Way, but you are also welcome to host these events yourself. And currently we have more than 175 contributors to the project, and we really want you to join our community as well. I hope I highlighted how beneficial it is. At least in my experience, not only you get to share your knowledge of reproducible research or maybe make your first open source contribution to your first open source contribution, but you can also get in touch with friendly people that may not have the same background as you, but we all share a common goal of trying to make science better. And an important part also, not to be forgotten, is that you get acknowledged for your work towards reproducible science. So if you want to join the community, here are a lot of links that you can use to do so. This talk is also going to be hosted in the Sonoro page, so you can go there and check out all these things. And a huge thanks to Kirsty and Malvika, who gave feedback on this talk, and to the Turing Way community in general, and you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Martina. Just imagine that there's a lot of clapping because that's what people are doing right now. Everybody's virtually clapping. I can see it happening in the chat. So this was a very nice talk and a very nice introduction to the Turing Way community and also to the guidelines and the handbook that is being presented. It's just amazing to see how many efforts are being done now, and I think there's a real change in the mentality of the way research is being conducted as a community. And I think that is something that we're seeing at different levels. And I think this is also something very important to the core of what this session is about today, is really trying to capturing this current vibe that has been going on for maybe like roughly 5 to a bit more years, started 5 years ago. And we're seeing this really emerge into something that, a long time ago, people were, if they discovered something useful for them, there was this, like, I don't know what weird attitude of people keeping it for them because they found out this thing, be it a code, be it a technique, be it a useful information. And now we're just seeing that the opposite is being glorified finally, which is actually, let's put all these things together. And if I discover something that's going to be useful to somebody else, then I would like to make it as available as possible to everyone else. And when you benefit from that, you feel yourself that you want to benefit too. So I think a similar mentality came in with Wikipedia when people started sharing knowledge, information, and then making it available to everyone. So I think this is very exciting. So we have two options now. Either we're going to go on for a 10-minute break, from what I understand, or I have been also told by the organizers that we can also skip the break and have some chat or some questions before. So I'm being told we can have some questions before we move on to Antonio's talk. So in that case, I'm just going to open up the questions we've been receiving. I think, so hopefully Guiomar is also around. Okay, great. So the first question we have here that has been voted up in the top 4 questions is a question to Guiomar, and I'm going to read it out. So the question is, in the BIDS metadata, you write information that is often expected or required in manuscripts as well. So for example, sampling rate when recording EEG, so on and so forth. So the question that has been asked, I think, by Antonio was, is there a tool that automatically copies information from the JSON file into a reproducible manuscript, for example, created by something like the R package, Papaya, for example? So could we actually benefit from all that information being nicely prepared within the structure so that we can sort of extract it and export it to something that will maybe even one day write up the whole method section?
Yeah, I think there's nothing ready yet, but I have to admit that 2 years ago, when I was starting the MEEG extension, I was also communicating with some people about this automatic writing, and we created a prototype that was able to copy in a semi-structured paragraph all the metadata, so it could be readable by humans in a method section, because at the end all these things are really like well structured, or at least they should be. So maybe it's time we retake this project. We have it on GitHub, the small pilot test, so and we can open it.
For MRI, from what I see from a comment by Remy Go, he says PyBids and BIDS MATLAB can do something like this, at least for MRI. So there might be also some nice examples out there that can be used to do something similar. And I see a comment by Susie Stiles saying, we're hoping that our Artem, that the Artemis proposal might be able to help with this too. So there's definitely an interest, because clearly this is going to also not only make life easier, but also ensure that you sometimes don't forget stupid details that like filtering information on your hardware or anything that you sometimes get reminded by reviewers that you should include it. But actually, if you have something automatic, it might make that process more efficient. And Remy Go, just a shout out, he says, we're looking for people to help us on the EEG and MEG front for PyBids. So that definitely sounds like a nice collaboration that can be set up there. And yeah, Natalie says we could articulate both. It's good to look at Artemis and BIDS. Anyway, so there's a lot of discussion on this. I will probably move on to the second question. So it's a question again to Guillaumard, and the question is: are you planning to develop modalities for combined techniques, like for example TMS and EEG, or for example combining fMRI and EEG? That's a question by Giacomo Bertazzoli.
I think this is available now. For example, when you do EEG and MEG or fMRI and EEG, there's an option like within the same session to keep the data for both. So I don't know if I'm missing something of the question.
No, I think that's probably a good answer to Giacomo's questions. He had a question about TMS and EEG, so I'm not quite sure where that is at this point, but fMRI and EEG is definitely something that is...
Yes, and MEG and EEG is also something, also with behavior you can... Yeah.
Okay, so that's good. I'll take the next question. Here we go. Question to Guillaumard again is: can BIDS favor multimodal data integration, allowing some tools for transforming timescale of one data, for example, to the timescale of another data set? Some form of like synchronization tools that can be useful for multimodal integration when you're trying actually to do fusion or integrate data from different modalities. Is there anything like an added value that BIDS can bring along in this context?
Yeah, I think that BIDS being now multi-imaging, it favors all these kind of things, all this kind of analysis, because now it will be very easy for tools to get like a minimum thing. Like, for example, if you relate to sampling frequency, like to get a minimum and try to analyze the data combined, and also not only regarding to sampling frequency, but data integration, that now that everything is put into the same standard, then it will facilitate the data integration. Yes, I think this is the way to go in the future.
Absolutely. So there's a question to Martina, and the question is: what is the time in the education to expose students to the Turing way? Do you do that for grad students or pre-grad? Basically, what would be, I think, according to Robert, like a good timing to get students exposed to this?
Well, I think that pre-grad would be amazing, because all the first part of the Turing Way talks more about like the philosophy of reproducible research and not so much about how to ensure that your work is reproducible. But having said that, it's also a nice read for whatever stage you are in, and I think that it's even useful for people who are even more established. There is like so much progress done in this reproducible research field that is a nice read for everyone. I think that it's not meant to be for one particular stage of your career.
Makes a lot of sense. Just maybe one quick comment about the chat. So Robert Ostenfeld just mentioned in the chat that he provided a nice link to an example that explains how to combine electromyography, EMG, with eye tracker and fMRI. So you can check that out if you're interested in an example of how to bring these things together. I'm gonna add one last question to Martina while Antonio gets ready to move to the stage. So the question is, could you give us maybe an example or a couple of examples of tips or rules that are given in the this could be a way to motivate lazy ones. And I'm not quite sure I'm going to read the name correctly, but Ayafil is saying he or she is not one of the lazy ones, but basically an idea of the type of things that maybe won't occur to people naturally, but by discovering the manual, it might make their life easier with useful tips. Do you have maybe some examples?
Right. So there's one thing that I think that even the chapters themselves are a guide, because they guide you on how to start thinking about reproducibility, like the names of the chapters themselves. But an example is, for example, always test your code, always introduce a test on your code. And there is a chapter talking about how what different types of tests you have and you should introduce in your code. Always try to introduce continuous integration techniques in your project, meaning you're always testing your software, not just one point in time after you have finished, I don't know, with your code or whatever. So there are multiple specific examples about how to also ensure that your computational environment is reproducible. So for example, Dockerizing your environment or using bits. Bits is also mentioned in the Turing way. So yeah, there are many specific examples more related with code and continuous integration techniques. Yeah, version control. Yeah.
Also sounds that from what I see, I went quickly and checked out online, that if you're a fan of cartoons and drawing, you should probably also check it out because you get inspiration. So I think that's an addition, an added value.
Yeah. Sure.
Thank you so much, Martina. And I'd like to also thank Guiomar for answering the questions. With this, now we're going to move on to our next speaker. So it's my pleasure to introduce Antonio Schettino, and he's going to tell us all about OSF. So Antonio, it's all yours.
Thank you. So I'm going to share the screen. I hope you can see my slides. Can you see my slides? I can't hear anything. Okay, I hope so. Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me to talk about the Open Science Framework. It's something that I do very often. My name is Antonio Schettino, and I'm coordinator of the Open Science community at Erasmus Medical Center and Erasmus University in the Netherlands. Today, however, I will also put my researcher hat on because I will talk about what kind of information I needed to share during my work as a cognitive and affective electrophysiologist. So this is the outline for the talk today. Basically, what was I looking for? What kind of tool was I looking for in order to be able to share the products of my research, not only the final publication, but everything in between. How I ended up checking out the Open Science Framework, and then I will provide a live example of profile page and an example project. There are going to be examples that I authored simply because I can be responsible for any mistakes, not because I want to toot my own horn. And then we can discuss, I'll provide some lessons learned, but we can discuss them later on. So of course, a disclaimer, I am not affiliated with the Center for Open Science, which created the Open Science Framework already, I think, in 2012. I'm not even an ambassador, although considering all the times that I've given this, that I've recommended the Open Science Framework to all researchers, then I should be made like, I don't know, an honorary ambassador or something like that. But with this disclaimer, I want to clarify that this is a perspective of an experienced end user and not a developer. There are very useful official guides on how to use the Open Science Framework that you can check out if you download the slides that I'm presenting and you click on these green words. They are hyperlinks. And of course, you can contact tech support, and for other questions or comments, there is a dedicated email account. Okay, so when I was doing research, what did I need? Like, if we consider a simplified version of the research lifecycle, starting from search for your for your experimental hypothesis up until the publication of the final report, there were some tools that I was using that I wanted to have in one single place. For example, with respect to bibliography, I was using Mendeley. Then I decided not to use Mendeley anymore since it was acquired by Elsevier, and I switched to Zotero. So I needed a place where my Zotero library could be seen. Then, with respect to the development of the idea, I wanted to make sure that I could pre-register my ideas and also be able to publicly show this pre-registration document. And we've been discussing the advantage of pre-registration yesterday. Then, for example, with data collection, initially my idea was to also collect some behavioral data online using PsychoPy. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. But at least, like I wanted something that would, in principle, be able to do that. And then data storage and data sharing was the most important thing for me. I wanted a safe backup first of all, so I needed something in the cloud that was safely with the redundancy available. And also something like a platform that would allow me to share data with collaborators, because not everybody was working in the same lab. And we were using Dropbox, Google Drive, and OneDrive, Microsoft OneDrive for that. So ideally, a tool that will allow me to connect, also to these storage services. And then for analysis code, well, initially I started with SPSS. Yes, I am that old, but then I switched. I switched to R because I started learning about learning how to code in R, and I also started to learn a bit about version control. So I started posting my code on GitHub. And also with respect to writing the report, well, I started using Google Docs especially for co-writing file publications. And so ideally, this platform would help me connect also the written report. And then, of course, after the report was written, I was looking for something that would allow me to post a preprint or even a postprint after the peer reviewing process was completed. Lo and behold, the only platform that I could find that would do all these things was the Open Science Framework, developed, as I said earlier, by the Center for Open Science, which is a nonprofit organization based in the US. So what is the Open Science Framework? The Open Science Framework is a system, some people would call it a virtual research environment that helps researchers manage, document, and optionally share research output and workflow. Optionally because by default everything is private, but posting it publicly is one click away. So it makes it extremely easy to then, make your first leap into opening your materials. This platform is free for researchers to use. Absolutely nothing needs to be paid. It is open source, so you can check the code, I think, on GitHub. And it is discipline agnostic, in the sense that it has a modular structure that allows its use in many disciplines, not only in social sciences. The link is osf.io. So about the research lifecycle, then, so is it true? Like, does the Open Science Framework really allow me to connect all the services that I was using? Well, it turns out that yes, it does allow that. Because if you're using Mendeley, it is connected to Mendeley, but you can also use Zotero, and you can connect your bibliography, your Zotero bibliography directly in your OSF repository. With respect to pre-registration, there is the OSF registries. So it is a platform that allows you to write down your pre-registration and publicly share it either immediately or after an embargo period. In terms of online data collection, unfortunately, I cannot vouch for this because I've never used it, as I said before, but there is integration with PsychoPy and Open Sesame and other very interesting open source software for stimulus presentation. In terms of data storage, this is where the Open Science Framework shines, in my opinion. You can really connect many different services. For example, at Ghent University, where I was working earlier, we had Dropbox and OneDrive. where I work now at Erasmus University, we have Figshare, but also, for example, OneDrive. So it is easy to connect all these services and make the data available through the OSF project. In terms of analysis code, you can seamlessly interface via R. At least that's what I know because I use R. I'm pretty sure that there is also the possibility to do it in Python. And then you can, in terms of version control, you can connect to GitHub, but also GitLab or Bitbucket, which are other services that are that form the same, that have the same purpose. In terms of co-writing, well, yeah, you can connect your Google Drive account, and so everything that you have in your Google Drive, including a Google Doc that you are co-writing together with your collaborators, can be shared. And regarding preprints, OSF preprints is again another platform that allows the posting preprints, and there are some different servers for different disciplines. Here, I'm just giving an example of, for social sciences, for example, the SciArchive for psychology. So now I would like to give you a brief tour of a couple of pages in case you decide to start your OSF account. This is what you would have. I hope everybody can see it. I don't have access to the chat, so please shout if something is wrong. But what you can see here is, for example, the account, the personal account that you can start, and you have information related to your social media accounts. For example, you can connect your ORCID account, Researcher ID, but also you can showcase your personal websites and Google Scholar for your publications. And then right below, you have a list of public projects and public components. What does it mean? What's the difference? Well, let me show you an example of a publicly available OSF project that I related to a publication that I co-authored. So this, you can access it. You don't need to be signed in or anything. You can access it publicly. So you can go on this website and then check it out for yourself. So what you have here is, of course, a title, and here is also a badge that says whether a specific institution has a dedicated open science framework page. And in this case, I'm affiliated with IGDOR because I'm working as an independent researcher. So IGDOR is connected as an institution that is affiliated with this particular project. Here you see the contributors, including myself, but also people who do not have an account. So they are here in black. Everybody else has an account. Date of creation, most importantly, digital object identifier. So you can cite your OSF projects. And what I usually recommend is to connect, to cite your OSF projects on your ORCID, by your ORCID account, so that you have in your ORCID list of publications not only what you have published in terms of papers, but also showing that you care and you put a lot of effort in open science practices by sharing data, by sharing code, or anything else that you have on your open science framework project. Here there is a wiki, which can provide an explanation of what the content of this particular project. Here on the right, there is a citation of this particular OSF project, so you can copy paste it. And if you look below, here you have different sub-components. So one project is just like imagine like a big container, and then you can put smaller containers inside it. So the modular nature of the open science framework makes it extremely versatile. And then here you can put whatever you want. You can put information related to the task that you used. For example, code and stimuli. So here there's code that we used. You can put raw data, pre-processed data, And you can do it in different ways. You can either use the servers that the Open Science Framework provides, or, as you can see below, you can connect other services, for example, GitHub and GitLab, or as I said earlier, your Dropbox account, your OneDrive account, so anything, so any other service that is partnering, that has an API and basically allows the connection between with the OSF. And of course here there is also the manuscript. If you have a reproducible manuscript, you can put that as well. So I hope I just gave a general idea of what you can see and what you can put on the Open Science Framework. It is extremely versatile. And now onto some lessons that I've learned. Of course, I've learned so much because I've been using it for 5 years. But one of the most important things is to plan in advance. And I think one of the best ways to plan in advance, especially when you have neuroimaging data, is by already thinking about your data management structure. And nothing beats bits, as we have learned today. So think in advance about how you are going to structure your data, use standardized formats, and then, if possible, connect institutional services. If your university has, for example, a Figshare repository, then it's better to do that and to put your data and your materials there, especially because starting from November the 3rd, the capacity of the servers on the Open Science Framework will be limited. So for private projects, it will be 5 gigabytes, and for public projects, it will be 50 gigabytes. So it's better to have your own add-on link to the OSF. And then, as I said earlier, advertise your output. There are, like, if you look at my ORCID profile, you'll see that I seem to be extremely prolific. But that's only because, together with the publication, there is also some form of open science output, and usually it's connected to the OSF. And then, as you may imagine, like, start immediately. If you haven't already started, my recommendation is to start as soon as possible. That's it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Antonio. This is great. This is a very nice introduction to OSF. So people who probably were not aware of it have now an idea of where to get started. I think this gives a nice overview, and I am really excited to see the complementarity between the 3 talks. We went from structures to practices, and then to actually an OSF type framework where you can actually bring these things in together and also increase visibility. I think the last point you mentioned is really important. I think not only is it a good practice to adopt open science principles, but it also increases visibility. So that is something that is definitely interesting for the scientists in us and the researchers in terms of sharing our findings, but also getting more exposure in terms of the research. And so there's definitely time that needs to be put into this at the beginning to get started, but then afterwards it becomes a habit, from what I understand from what your message that you're trying to get out. And that is an important habit, because it's a win-win finally for the community and for the researchers themselves that put effort into this, right? So maybe I have one quick question to you before I start pulling out questions from the audience. I have one quick question, which is maybe what do you see so far has been in the past the main bottleneck or the main issue that maybe some people with goodwill said, okay, I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to go to OSF and I'm going to start connecting my different modules to it. And then after a week, they just dropped it and they were not doing it anymore after some initial excitement. What is the thing that potentially can be a problem and that should be overcome, and maybe best ways of dealing with it in your experience?
Well, I'm a big believer in training. So I don't think that researchers should be left alone to learn all these tools because there's not enough time. Like, I made a conscious choice when I was doing my second postdoc to make sure that I would learn all these things because I cared, because it was interesting for me. But that had an impact on my productivity in terms of publications because I had to learn everything on my own. Right now, I think there are enough resources, there are enough people knowing how to use platforms like the Open Science Framework, so we can really help each other. And allow me to say that now that I have more of a support role at the university in Rotterdam, I would say that it is, I would consider it a duty of care of the university to provide this sort of trainings. And that's what we're trying to do. So together with my colleagues at Erasmus Research Services, we are doing exactly this. We're trying to help researchers, we support them at every stage of the research life cycle. And this is just one of the examples.
So these are arrangements that are being made between OSF and individual universities to provide training and educate students and researchers about how to use OSF. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that is one possibility. Yes, the Open Science Framework has a program called OSF Institutions that creates a specific page for a university, and then one of the things that they offer is also training. But what I'm talking about, what we do, for example, is so I train researchers. I teach them how to use the Open Science Framework. So what I'm saying is that also data stewards and support staff at the local university could help you do that. And of course, I understand that it depends a lot on the university, it depends a lot on the culture within the institution, but that's what I would strive for.
But so let me just ask you, I'm just curious, does this come with a cost to the university if, say, one university says, because I'm particularly thinking about universities in certain countries that might not have funds dedicated to this type of activities and training for their students. Is this something that OSF is providing to universities on a free basis, or is this something that universities have to pay for OSF to be giving these training sessions to their students?
Well, I think they are in the process of changing the procedure, but I am not a spokesperson for the Center for Open Science. So I would say, like, if you or your institution, if you're interested in this, it's better to contact them directly, because I cannot give you the information, like the details that they will be able to give you.
I think you said at the beginning you wanted to be an honorary ambassador, and now you just showed that you have the diplomacy to do that. Your diplomatic answer, so you could become an ambassador.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't know. If at the end of the day we get it for free for universities, it's a good thing. So maybe what I'll do in terms of timing now, maybe I think we should move on to the to our general roundtable discussion, so that we can all address questions all together and continue to debate. And again, I'm just going to tell the attendees, all the people that have joined us, feel free to post more questions and vote on the questions that you see that have been already asked. There's an Ask a Question link at the bottom of your screen. So go ahead and ask us your questions. Exactly, I'm just going to say we're waiting for Guillermo and Martina to join us, and Guillermo is already here. So maybe, exactly. So now I'm going to, thank you very much. I'm going to go up and bring up the first question that I have here, which is a question to Antonio. And the question reads, can you comment on concerns in sharing personal data as per GDPR from research participants in the EU on OSF? This is quite a specific question. And is there an OSF instance where the data is under control of an organization that falls under EU rather than US legislation? So it's a technical question from Robert.
Yeah, it's a very good question. So thanks, Robert. So again, I'm not a spokesperson for the Center for Open Science, but what I've read is that so what I know for sure is that now there's a possibility to store your data on repository on servers in Germany, so they fall under the EU rules and regulations.
I think it's Frankfurt. If there's servers in Frankfurt.
Correct. That's correct. Taking into account that these are Google servers, right? So with all caveats associated to that, but they fall under GDPR rules and regulations. Having said that, I would still recommend, if you have the possibility, I would still recommend to use your institutional repository and connect it to the OSF, because then these repositories are vetted for security and privacy by people within the university that do their job, that do that job exactly. So they check whether privacy-sensitive information can be put on these repositories or on these services, or whether it's better not to do it. So it is institution-specific.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I'm going to pull up the next question. The next question is from Clemens Brunner, and he was wondering, this is a question to Antonio, so he was wondering how sustainable OSF is. He says it is a non-profit organization, and all of the services are free, but if everyone stores their data, I'm sure their costs will increase rapidly. And do they have a statement on what happens if their funds run out? I think I saw that on their website, but I'm going to let Antonio answer.
Yes, that's another very good question. Again, don't take my word as gospel. You can ask all this information and find this information on the Center for Open Science website. What I remember is that there is like a sort of insurance that even if the OSF and if the Center for Open Science goes bankrupt tomorrow, for I think 10 years, the information that the data posted there will still be available. Now, I hope that the Center for Open Science will thrive for until I live, because I think it's one of the best services that we have right now. And I think they're also mindful of the fact that costs are increasing. So they are, for example, as I said earlier, they are lowering the maximum amount of gigabytes that you can use on their servers for public and private projects, because up until November the 3rd, everything was completely unlimited. So now it's clear that they have to cut on some costs, and they're doing it in my way, in a sensible way, because still, for public projects, 50 gigabytes is quite a lot. And once again, this doesn't take into account the fact that those gigabytes do not count if your data are on your institutional repository, right? So, and that's another reason for me to recommend using add-ons and your institutional repository.
And probably also a wider adoption and an increased number of users might also help OSF secure more funding for the future. So there's also a cycle here between institutions and individuals adopting OSF, and that will increase the base and increase the usage, and that will help OSF probably secure institutional funding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. I'm going to move on to the next question on the list. We have a question. This is a follow-up, I guess, to Robert's question. And this is to Antonio from Jay Wirish. And does U.S. embargo apply to the OSF, which would ban researchers from certain countries, example, Cuba, and potentially in some cases Iran and others, to contribute?
So it's a really difficult question. I don't have an answer for that. I would find it a bit difficult to believe that. I mean, there's no data curation at the OSF, right? So whatever you post is your sole responsibility. And whoever collaborates with you is their own responsibility. So I don't know. I really don't know how this would play out. So I'm sorry. I'm afraid you'll have to ask directly to the Center for Open Science.
Okay, great. So I'm going to move on to the next question, and this is also a question regarding OSF. So it's for you, Antonio, and this is a question by Guillemar, who's just next to you right here on the screen. She's asking if we compare now OSF to Zenodo. Between the two, what are the differences, and what other platforms are there out there that might be looking to do offer similar services? So first of all, Zenodo versus OSF, and are there any others that you see out there?
So I've never used Zenodo, so my apologies if I don't know the service well enough to.
Well, maybe Guillemar, you can tell us something about Zenodo briefly.
I know it. It's just that I've never used it, so I can't, I cannot really give I don't have in mind all the different aspects of that. I love it. I love the idea behind it. It's just that I think that they have different purposes, because Zenodo seems to be more like a repository that assigns a DOI and that's it. Whereas the Open Science Framework, you should think of it more of a virtual research environment where you can connect different services in one big environment. So you can connect something that you have on Zenodo, which can be your presentation, your data, anything else you want. You can connect it, and then you can also connect your data through that you have hosted on GitHub, and you can connect your preprint that you have posted on an archive or a repository. So think of it more of as an ecosystem rather than just a storage place. What other platforms are there? Platforms other than the OSF? I have no idea. I've spent 5 years looking for them, because I love to try and test out new stuff, and I haven't found anything like this. So for now, yeah, there's nothing that I know of.
Very good ambassador. I'm telling you, you're going to get the job.
I swear, I'm not paid by them.
They should pay you. So Robert also says that Zenodo is only for files, not so much for the active process like documenting and collaboration and pre-registration. So that's in line with what you were just saying. Maybe I have another question while we wait, in case maybe there are other questions that come from the audience. I would like to take you onto another maybe more slippery terrain, and which is we're in a global village. So we're as a community of researchers across the globe, with universities, scientists, and students in many countries around the world. And now more than ever, we get to see what others are doing, and we're connected through all the different platforms that we can connect with. And it seems that there's a lot that can be done to reduce disparity and the difference between the chances and the opportunities that students in a rich country get compared to students elsewhere. That's one point. And the other one is the principles of equity, diversity, and inclusion within our field, and specifically within this effort of collaborative tools. So I know for sure that there's a lot that can be done in this respect, but I would like to hear from the three of you. What do you see as the major issues, problems, and the opportunities maybe that these efforts can bring in to actually helping out with this? So the disparity between I think Guillaume alluded earlier on to the global south. So there's that divide, but there's also other different forms of divide. And so we might have an opportunity here with these tools and with these approaches and with this mentality to like improve things a lot, and things are quite bad. So there's a lot of things that we should do. And I would like to hear from the three of you, what is your take on this? And maybe, I don't know who would like to start by addressing this. I'm going to let it open. I'm not going to choose somebody.
So I think one point that I found very interesting on this is that one barrier, for at least if we're talking about regional differences, so we usually have in these kind of projects, open source in general is full of people from the States or Canada and Europe, but very little representation from other places on Earth. And one thing that really helped in the Turing Way was doing these online meetings that are regular. And they are done in a way that you also get, I don't know if you know this Pomodoro technique, where you have like, you set a timer and you work silently during this time. So people that might be shy at first have like a silent working time. And then we have like 5 minutes where we talk to each other and stuff like that. So it's like a really nice place to do like the first interactions with people that you may not be familiar with on a regular basis. But the fact that you have regular meetings that are in person helps like to set like a different level of compromise to the project. And it also makes you feel like you are there, which is, I think, like the biggest barrier in this case is everything happens in Europe, everything happens in the States, everything happens in Canada. And then in this case, everything happens online. So you don't have that barrier anymore.
That's a very nice example, but it has to, so the student that is working at a university in a country where they have more difficulties potentially, there needs to be access to this information. They need to hear about the event in the first place before even getting online and doing what you say. So there must be maybe something that needs to be done for this information to go out there. I feel that since the pandemic, the availability of online talks and conferences that are all going online, and many actually for free, that is somehow trickling down, and then we're getting more exposure and we're getting more attendees that come from many countries that would have never had the opportunity potentially to go travel to conferences internationally happening in Europe or in North America. So maybe as part of these conferences, we could think about more and more setting up events or satellite events in these online, ideally online and free conferences to attract students and PIs, researchers to these types of initiatives. Guimar, would you like to comment on what maybe? I mean, it's difficult to say what is BIDS going to do to save the world. That's not my question. But how can we maybe improve things through these types of initiatives?
Yeah, to be honest, I have very little experience with this. It's something I'm concerned, but I sometimes, but I'm not very used, but try to use social media like Twitter on this, because this is also a way to broadcast the events and give a bit more diffusion to people that maybe by chance they read, and then you start. I think once one is there, they can talk to other people and the community can grow. So, but also I've been like in the OHBM, they have these 3 timetables because sometimes the schedules are like always thought for Europe and America, and also when there's the availability online things, then this makes people very easy.
From your experience, what about the diversity and, for example, representation of visible minorities and so on within the contributors to BIDS? Is everything being done that the environment is welcoming, and that the code of conduct and things like that are being ensured so that everybody feels welcome and everybody tries as much as, to increase the presence of diversity within the teams working on BIDS apps and BIDS derivatives?
Yeah, I think we are really lucky to have a Christy Whittaker with us. So she really puts a lot of effort in this sense. She's like on the integration and for example, when electing the BIDS steering group, I think people voted for a well-balanced group from diverse people, also women versus men, but still we are all Europe and America. So yeah, but yeah, I think we should definitely put a lot of effort. That's why I plot the world map.
Yes, yeah.
Because I saw that there were some countries that are lacking behind. So we should put some efforts. But yeah, I don't have like a super solution.
I feel that just by construction, also these initiatives, they provide opportunities. So for example, even the fact that I think it was Martina mentioning that you get recognition for your contributions. So if you're contributing to this and you get recognition, this could be also useful for CVs of students that are like in very early stage of their careers, and be able to say, I have so and so many points on OSF, or so and so many points, or some sort of recognition. My efforts have been recognized on the website of the Turing Way, or I have been part of the team that has been developed. These are things that I think that could be empowering and also increase visibility, and that nowadays can be done wherever you are, because you just have to be behind your computer somewhere. So that geographical barrier disappears in that sense, and you can be part of a community even if you are physically far away. Antonio, did you have anything to comment about that?
Well, perhaps I can take off my researcher hat and put back the community coordinator hat on. So at Erasmus University, I'm coordinating the Open Science Community Rotterdam, and initially, I mean, the idea is to keep it, of course, within, at least at the beginning, within the boundaries of the university. But of course, the ambition is always to open up and to be even more inclusive, because there needs to be more and more voices, and there needs to be more representation. I think it's less challenging to do it online, in the sense that I know I really don't want to sound morbid or anything, but in a way, for cohesion and community building, working online has been a good opportunity. You know, you can see the opportunity, despite the fact that the situation is far from ideal. But I think, just like you mentioned earlier, online communities can, by virtue of their structure, be more inclusive. What I try to do all the time, and I am failing, and I have to get better at that, is to listen more, rather than like putting my own biases within the direction of the community. That's something that on a personal level, but also on a professional level, I think would enrich us all.
Absolutely, we need to listen more to be able to act better, right? But we absolutely, also we need to, those of us who are in a privileged position to act, I guess we should act, but you're absolutely right. We need to listen to be able to identify what's the best way forward. I just want to draw everyone's attention that then there's a poll now that you can answer to, and at the very bottom of the screen, that's where the polls are. The question is, do you use the tools that have been mentioned during the session? This will just give us an idea for the people around here who use them routinely or who uses them occasionally or not yet. Obviously, it's a tough question to answer because this englobes all three the approaches that we've discussed today. It's not specific to only one of them. Yeah, you can answer. So this, for now, most people are saying yes occasionally. That's about 46%. I would also like to highlight a nice point that Aina mentioned in the chat. She says, I think that COVID crisis will enable us to really make more concerted efforts related to diversity. And this potentially could be seen as one of the few positive benefits of the pandemic, the disaster. Gil?
Yeah, so, it does a call if someone is watching and it's from a minority or from somewhere like feel underrepresented, please join and please contact us, and we will be able to really welcome you to the community, to any of these communities. Please contact.
Absolutely, I think that's a very strong message to send out to everyone, and we can also think about ideas of how maybe we can also increase incentive for maybe students and researchers across the globe in different countries to contribute. And maybe we can even raise funds for this type of activities where there will be also some incentive to get different people involved in this. I think, we have some questions. So also we have in the poll now, it has been extended. So we have also more questions. One is, I use OSF, yes, no, or I use BIDS, yes, no, and I use the Turing Way, yes, no. You can't answer maybe, so it's just binary. As for the questions, we do have one question here. That comes probably from Manuel or for somebody from the organizers. Any news or anyone using an open brain consent? Is this something that anybody is aware of or is using? This is, I think, a question by Manuel. So open brain consent, and also you can look at the questions. You also sent a link to this.
I personally have heard of that, but I have not had the chance to use it for my own experiments because I don't have any more experiments. I mean, no, yeah, maybe like, you know, for future collaborations, yes, definitely.
So maybe I have one quick question also to Antonio. The fact that the OSF is discipline agnostic, that's probably one strength. Some might see it also as a potential weakness. So what is your take on that?
Well, I consider it a strength, but it is true that you know, there are, for example, some data that have a specific structure that does not lend itself well to an OSF-like structure. I don't know, probably some genomic data for which, like other repositories are better suited. And then I would say, yes, of course, the OSF then is better, it's better not to use it if this can give you more headaches than anything. But besides, I think this 80-20 rule that Guiomar was also talking about applies to the OSF as well, in the sense that for the majority of cases, I think there's something that can be useful on the OSF for everybody, for almost everybody.
Okay, so I'm going to move on. We're getting close to the last 3 or 4 minutes of this session. We have a question from Lucia Meloni. I'm going to read out the question. I would love to hear the thoughts from the speakers and audience regarding the metadata and shared ontologies to describe experiments. It seems to me that efforts on those ends are very needed, and this will be most important for analysis combining multiple open data sets. So if somebody wants to comment on that, please go ahead. Basically, the use of metadata and shared ontologies to describe experiments.
Yeah, I think there have been some discussions on the chat, but in BITS metadata, there has been like collaboration into ending terms, and there. Robert, as Robert mentioned, BITS is using shared ontologies like CoPro, but also DICOM terms. And every time we work on a bed, we go through the process of explaining the domain-specific bed lead and researchers involved. What was the value in using an existing vocabulary and ontology? So I guess this may help. And
yeah, well, it would clearly be very helpful in moving forward. Antonio, you wanted to mention something on this?
No. It's just I don't have enough knowledge on, because I don't think there's anything that I know of in the works with respect to describing experiments. I think there are some efforts by Lisa de Bruyn and Daniel Lack and some of others to standardize and make a bit more machine readable hypotheses within a particular experiment and within a particular text as well. But it's not the same as ontologies and vocabularies for the experiment description. So I know nothing like that, sorry.
Okay.
yeah, the ending terms, like every keyword that is on BITS, on any of the specifications, you can look it up, so you can know what it means and where is it used, and if you want to define a new word so it doesn't overlap. So there's been some efforts there. I will share the links.
So there's been some efforts, but probably this is something that needs to be improved in the future to be made more systematic and easier to access that information, because clearly it would be very helpful to have this.
I think that many tools, we have just started, so many tools are going to be really developed further in the coming years.
Well, that's great. We're very close to the end of the session. I think we have maybe a minute or two more left. If somebody has a question, I'm sure also some people might need a break before moving on to the next session afterwards. So I don't see any more questions coming in. So I thank you guys. I want to thank you, the three of you, for doing an outstanding job in this presentations today, and also in addressing all the questions. And I think you managed to create a lot of excitement, but also share knowledge about things that people not necessarily all knew about. By looking at the polls, I can see that a lot of people are not aware of some of these techniques or are not using them. So that's really interesting, because this is exactly the type of message that we want this type of session to give out. So people to go check out these things, and specifically now you've seen the three people, very motivated and efficient, that are involved in these projects. So if you run into any problems trying to work with either BIDS, OSF, or with the Turing way, just drop an email to these guys. and I'm sure they'll help you along the way. And that's the way we want this community to be running, working all collaboratively. And we want to also, moving forward, make sure that we increase the impact of all this work so that it's also beneficial to people all over the globe. With that, I'm going to hand back the mic to Antonio. Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you, Karim, because you have been chairing this session like a pro. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you, Mr. Ambassador. We're going to get jobs too.
Yes.
Yeah, we are.
Okay, and last but not least, we want to thank the audience.
We are organizing a meeting. I mean, Cutting Edge is organizing a meeting in next spring. I mean, early summer. So I guess, Antonio, you're much welcome to come and to join. Yeah, I would like to thank you, all of you, Guiomar, Martina, and Antonio, for your talk. And I would like to thank you, Karim, for chairing this session. I know how much requested you are, not only at the University of Montreal. So it was really kind of you to join us on board. And I shouldn't forget to mention that you will be with us also tomorrow. Yes. You will start the signal processing station, and you will tell us about MEG and EEG in the age of machine learning, data-driven versus hypothesis-driven science. So you are going not only to talk about methods, but also to talk about how to use them like correctly. And you will, I hope. To finish, I would like to thank you all for being with us. The session is going to end, but you can continue with LiveMEEG by following the reliability session that will start in a few minutes. And again, it's a pleasure to have to see all those connections from all over the world, and to see like a kind people. It's really motivating to see all those tools that have been developed. Thank you. Just if you can have a quick look on the polls to finish. So it seemed that actually I wouldn't have bet that I mean, a majority of people use occasionally the tools that you have been presenting. It's almost, oh no, it's a little bit less, like it's almost half-half for I use OSF. I'm hoping that more people will use bits, but I'm sure they will. I'm going to start. And for the Turing Way, I'm glad that that we made a kind of a publicity. We advertised for it because I started to read the blog, and I think it's extremely useful. So thank you all. See you later today or tomorrow or later in the week. And bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone. Thank you very much.
See you, Navid. Bye. Thank you.